Former Canadian ambassador to Ukraine and business ombudsman with the Business-Ombudsman Council. Roman, thank you for your time. I'm not sure if you heard my interview with the Ukrainian MP who is there, but he basically said more, obviously, needs to be done. And if it's not a no-fly zone, it is further sanctions on Russian oil and gas and turning off those taps. How likely is that to happen? What more sanctions can be levied against Russia this time?
Well, we can see that Russia's clearly not impressed enough with the sanctions that have been imposed so far. And, we can say things like we find this very much unacceptable, but President Putin, frankly, doesn't care what we say. He cares about what we do. Canada has already cut off Russian oil, and certainly we don't get gas, but Russian oil. So has the U.S. The big customers are in Europe. A lot of European countries, France notably among them, are ready to take that step. Germany is the big holdout because they are both the most dependent, because they had pursued a policy of interdependence supposed to be giving them leverage over Russia, and it's turned out to be rather the opposite. So they are the holdout now in terms of the European Union, at least temporarily ceasing buying oil from Russia, if not gas.
Mm-hmm. The MP also said that Putin doesn't want to stop at Ukraine, that Poland will be next. So that lends credence, if it is indeed true, to their argument that a no-fly zone should be implemented. We've heard, obviously, the discussions as to why it should not. At what point, though, does that red line get crossed?
Well, former President Medvedev, part of Putin's team, published an article today about Poland. And it's very similar to an article he published last November. Says you're a no-good country with evil intent and you're just a bunch of American vassals and you'll be sorry. So that does suggest that Poland has shown up on the Russians' radar. Poland, of course, has been very active in solidarity with Ukraine. It's the lifeline, both economically and in terms of military supplies. And I think the Poles realize that the conflict in Ukraine, it's in very violent, obvious form, but in hybrid form affecting countries like Poland and others in Europe is already on. So this idea that if we just mouth enough platitudes, it will go away, I think no longer stands the reality test.
So then, Roman, what are you suggesting?
What I would suggest is at least a partial no-fly zone, starting with a small part of the west of the country, pointing out that we are not going to accept that parts of Ukraine, which are its sovereign territory, sovereign airspace, it's Ukrainian airspace, not Russian airspace, can be turned into more killing zones. It's probably too late in many respects for Mariupol, and that's a tragedy.
Yes.
But we can deal with those territories that are closest to the NATO border. My wife has cousins who live near the border, and their house shook and their windows rattled when the Russians launched that missile attack against the Yavoriv base a week ago. So it's really hard to avoid the feeling that if we don't take some of these steps now, we're going to have to take them later and in a considerably weakened position.
Roman Waschuk is a former Canadian ambassador to Ukraine and business ombudsman with the Business-Ombudsman Council. I appreciate your insight and joining us today from Krakow in Poland. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Okay.